constitutional republic, not a democracy. The ideal of a democracy is universal equality. The ideal of a constitutional republic is individual liberty. A democracy always degenerates into dictatorship, which promises government-guaranteed equality and security, but it delivers nothing but poverty and serfdom for the people it robs and rules. America was founded as a constitutional republic to safeguard the liberties of the people against the tyranny of democracy or of one-man dictatorship. In this century, great strides have been made toward the goal of subverting our republic into a democracy. The foremost tactic of the subverters is subversion of language. By calling America a democracy until people thoughtlessly accept and use the term, the totalitarians have obscured the real meaning of our principles of government. That is a summary of my report on a constitutional republic, not a democracy. The full report after a message from my sponsor. A democracy is a political system in which the people periodically, by majority vote at the polls, select their rulers. The rulers then have absolute power to make whatever laws they please by majority vote among themselves. In a constitutional republic, the people also, by majority vote at the polls, select rulers who make laws by majority vote among themselves. But the rulers cannot make any laws they please because the Constitution severely restricts their lawmaking power. The ideal of a democracy is universal equality. The ideal of a constitutional republic is individual liberty. In this century, great strides have been made toward the goal of subverting our republic and transforming it into a democracy. The foremost tactic of the subverters is subversion of language. By calling America a democracy until people thoughtlessly accept and use the term, totalitarians have obscured the real meaning of American principles of government. Note the following passages from a recent article distributed by the New York Times News Service. Quote, "In the United States and in other leading democracies, recent years have seen perceptible growth in executive authority. As society becomes more equalitarian, it tends increasingly to concentrate absolute power in the hands of one single man. This is a voluntary surrender of a free people escaping from freedom to one autocratic master." End quote. And note the following from Gunnar Myrdal's An American Dilemma. Quote, "In America, liberty often provided an opportunity for the stronger to rob the weaker. Against this, the equalitarianism in the American creed has been persistently revolting. And in the conflict between equality and liberty, equality is slowly winning. In America, conservatism has to a great extent been perverted into a cult of the Constitution. This is unfortunate, since the Constitution is in many respects impractical and ill-suited for modern conditions. The worship of the Constitution is also a most flagrant violation of the American creed. The Constitutional Convention was nearly a plot against the common people." End quote. Now, Gunnar Myrdal, a Swedish socialist, was hired by the Carnegie Corporation of New York in 1937 to direct a study of the Negro in the United States. He engaged a large staff, some of them communists and pro-communists. An American Dilemma resulted, first copyrighted in the United States in 1944. In 1954, the Supreme Court handed down a school segregation decision, which deliberately violated the Constitution, reversed a previous Supreme Court decision, and lit a fuse touching off explosive violence, which has been shattering our society ever since. The court cited An American Dilemma as one of the modern authorities on which it relied in preference to the Constitution for justification of its decision. An American Dilemma, written by a Swedish socialist, provided a basic rationale for the conversion of our free republic into an equalitarian democracy. Myrdal contends that the American Declaration of Independence, 1776, proclaimed the ideal of an equalitarian democracy because it contains the phrase, "all men are created equal." 11 years later, the Constitution created not a democracy founded on the ideal of equality, but a republic founded on the ideal of liberty. This is why Myrdal says the Constitutional Convention was nearly a plot against the common people. But he and those who parrot his ideas are either ignorant or dishonest. The Constitution was ordained specifically to safeguard the principles of liberty proclaimed by the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration's phrase, "all men are created equal," means that men are equal before the law and before the Creator, regardless of their inequality in human society. The Declaration says that men are endowed with unalienable rights, and that the purpose of government is to secure these rights. The unalienable rights of man enumerated in the Declaration of Independence do not include equality, but they do include liberty, along with life and pursuit of happiness. Equality of all men in the eyes of God and before the law is a condition essential to freedom, but no other kind of equality is possible. Government efforts to achieve material equality will produce crushing tyranny, but will not make people equal. The writers of the Constitution were anxious to safeguard liberty against dictatorship, monarchy they called it, but their chief anxiety was to protect the country against democracy. Edmund Randolph, delegate to the Constitutional Convention from Virginia, said the general object of the convention was to provide a cure for the follies and fury of democracy. Elbridge Gerry and Roger Sherman, delegates from Massachusetts and Connecticut, urged the Constitutional Convention to create a system to eliminate the evils that flow from the excess of democracy. Alexander Hamilton, delegate from New York, said, "We are now forming a Republican government. Real liberty is not found in democracy. If we incline too much to democracy, we shall soon shoot into a monarchy." John Adams, one of the giants of the American Revolutionary period, said, "Democracy will envy all, contend with all, endeavor to pull down all. And when by chance it happens to get the upper hand for a short time, democracy will be revengeful, bloody, and cruel." Speaking of pure democracy, in which the people by a majority vote act as their own lawmakers, instead of electing representatives to make laws, James Madison said, "Such democracies have ever been incompatible with personal security or the rights of property. A republic promises the cure for which we are seeking." Madison, known as the father of the Constitution, knew and said that enlightened men will not always be at the helm of government to serve as proper guardians of the public weal. He knew that unlimited political power cannot safely be entrusted to the nation's elected representatives, to use as a majority of them see fit, because, he said, a majority of a group of men is far more likely to be tyrannical than one man is. In a democracy, if a majority should develop hatred for all blue-eyed babies and order them eliminated, the babies could be legally executed, because whatever a majority wants at any given moment is supreme law of the land in a democracy. How can liberty be safeguarded against the mindless, soulless tyranny of majority rule when government is founded on the principle of majority rule? Jefferson answered that one, "In questions of power, let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution." In short, America was founded not as a democracy, but as a constitutional republic. We pledge allegiance to the republic, for which our flag stands, not to a democracy. The Constitution requires a republican form of government for all states, but does not mention democracy, and neither does the Declaration of Independence or the Bill of Rights. The Constitution is a binding contract, enumerating limited powers which the federal government can legally exercise, prohibiting it from exercising any powers not granted in the contract. It denies federal officials the power to do whatever they claim to be necessary for the general welfare. Federal action not clearly authorized by the Constitution is illegal, even if approved by an overwhelming majority of the people, because all the elastic powers of government are left with the states. Ultimate power to change the organic structure of government was left with the people, but the means of making changes, amending the Constitution, were carefully prescribed to militate against hasty, unwise decisions by the people. As Benjamin Franklin left the State House in Philadelphia on the closing day of the Constitutional Convention, a woman asked him what kind of government the convention had given America, and Franklin replied, "A republic, if you can keep it." Very old and very wise, Franklin saw through the mists of time to the day when Americans might trade their freedom in a constitutional republic for the promise of government guaranteed equality and security in a democracy. And beyond that, to the day when democracy inevitably degenerates into dictatorship, guaranteeing nothing but poverty and serfdom for the people it robs and rules. The American constitutional system, unique in history, enabled Americans to develop a backward continent into the most magnificent nation of all time. The system was designed to prevent both tyranny by government and reckless rebellion by the people. We must restore it and keep it. And what can you do toward that end? Your job, you who care and understand, is to help educate others. I suggest that you might find a subscription to my report helpful. The Dan Smoot report, on which these broadcasts are based, is sent every week through the mails and will reach you.
The American people are living in a matrix. They don't understand the truth of how things are working in this country, you know. And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. The very fact is that if you ask 100 people on the street, what kind of government is America supposed to be? 99% of them will tell you a democracy. America is supposed to be a democracy. But that's a lie. That's an illusion. The word democracy is not written into the Constitution at one time. It's not in the Bill of Rights. It's not in the Declaration of Independence. The Founding Fathers hated the idea of a democracy. They thought it was the worst form of government there is. And I agree with them. Because in a democracy, 51% of the people control 49% of the people. If you're part of the 49%, you're not free. America was founded as a constitutional republic. And in that constitutional republic that we have, 99% of the people can't take away the rights of 1%. You have your rights because you were born with them. You have God-given human rights that nobody can take away from you. The government, the majority, no matter who they are, I can't take away your rights. And that's what our founding fathers gave us. But the psychological operations that they do to us, they make us believe that we're a democracy and that majority rules. You see? And they want you to believe that. Because then they tell you this poll says this many want this and this many want that and this many want this, and it doesn't have anything to do with anything.
Well, Hitler was elected.
Hitler was elected. Hitler did everything legally.
And in a constitutional republic, a minority is protected against a majority. Wasn't it Benjamin Franklin, to paraphrase, that said democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner?
Exactly. And then he also said in a republic, the sheep would have a gun to protect himself. You know, and that's the truth. America's not a democracy, but you ask the most intelligent people what form of government America is supposed to be, they'll say democracy. Because that's what they've been brainwashed. They've been psyoped into believing that. They believe that we're in Iraq. They believe we're in Iraq to promote democracy. The word democracy, you hear George Bush saying democracy means freedom. No, democracy equals New World Order. Democracy equals slavery. The word democracy is not synonymous with freedom. It's the opposite of freedom. Democracy is the worst form of government you can have because it's majority rule. And the government can tell you exactly what they want to tell you to do because the majority wants it. I don't care what the majority wants. I live my life as I choose. And if I don't commit violence, theft, or fraud against another human being, I can live my life as I wish. That's my choice. And if I'm allowed to make mistakes, because when you make mistakes, you learn from them. You grow as a human being. We're put on this earth to become the best individuals we can be, to fulfill our God-given potential.
One topic that every elementary school kid, every junior high kid, every high school kid should have to learn about, and that we should teach our leaders because they don't know it either, is that we are not a democracy. We don't want to go around the world fighting for democracy. We're not a democracy. We are a republic. And a republic is a democratically elected government, but it's restrained by a document. The Constitution restrains. We have enumerated powers. This is all the government's supposed to do, is what the Constitution gave it in power. And it is restrained. And that is so important, but so misunderstood. If you have a pure democracy, 50% of the people could vote to take away your rights. 50% of the people could say, well, Italians should be slaves, or black people should be slaves. We have restraint in our government. The majority cannot decide to take away rights from the minority. And even if the majority in Congress decide to do so, we're supposed to have the restraint in Congress, in the Supreme Court, to check them. And it worked for a long time. It hasn't worked until recently. For the last 40 or 50 years since the New Deal, the Supreme Court's just been a rubber stamp for all these things that have, I think, been going away from constitutional restrictions. There's been a little bit of going back in the other direction recently. They struck down part of the McCain-Feingold bill. Could have been even better, but they did strike down part of it that says a taxpayer group, like I have a taxpayer group in Kentucky, it's actually been illegal for me to spend money to say that my local congressman voted to raise your taxes. I could be put in jail and fined $50,000 for buying advertising, which sounds about as un-American as you can imagine.
Hi Glenn Beck, this is Mike from Pittsburgh. I'm making this video to tell you about the indoctrination our children are receiving in their schools. Glenn, earlier this year you spoke several times about how the media is always incorrectly saying that America is a democracy, and I agree. America is in fact a constitutional republic. So I decided to investigate and see what my children are being taught in school. In Hampton here, we use textbooks from Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. And in the 3rd grade textbook it says this: throughout the summer, Benjamin Franklin and other leaders of the new country discussed their plan. Who would make the laws and how? How much power should each of the part of the government have? They decided that the United States would be a democracy. A democracy is a government in which the people govern themselves. In a democracy, citizens choose their leaders. Review question: what type of government is the United States? Answer: democracy. This is completely false. Ben Franklin said when asked what type of government we would have, quote, a republic, man, if you can keep it. And Ben Franklin further said about democracy, quote, democracy is like 2 wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch, and liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote. In fact, all of our founding fathers have said that a democracy is one of the worst types of government. As an example, James Madison, the 4th President of the United States, said, quote, democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their death. In other words, democracies always lead to chaos, anarchy, and dictatorship. So I'd like to know why my school is teaching my children that America is a democracy, when you can look it up in Wikipedia or anything, and it says that America is a constitutional republic. More indoctrination from the 4th grade text. This says, the United States is a democracy. A democracy is a system in which the people hold the power of government. The people will decide who will lead them and what the government will do. Democracy can take several forms. In many small towns, every person votes on every rule and decision. This does not work well, however, for a large nation. So instead, the government of the United States is a representative democracy. Our representatives make day-to-day decisions for the government. That is what makes us a democracy. Please note in this passage how many times they repeat democracy. It's 5 times. Okay, my last example. In our 6th grade textbooks from Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. Like ancient Rome, the United States has a representative democracy. I thought Rome was a republic. Okay, so like ancient Rome, the United States has a representative democracy. The United States democracy is also a constitutional democracy. In constitutional democracy, the goals of the government and the ways it will work to achieve them are laid out in a constitution, or plan for governing. Today, most countries have constitutions, yet not all countries with constitutions are democracies. Many countries now are democracies, but not all democracies are alike. For example, Canada's democracy differs in many ways from that of the United States. Unlike the United States, Canada has a democracy with a parliament. I'm skipping a few lines here. And the next paragraph says, democracies require effort on the part of the citizens of a country. For a democracy to work well, citizens need to participate, stay informed, and vote. A democracy can be overthrown by a dictator, can be voted out of existence, or can last for centuries, as the United States democracy has. And then there's a review question. how would you describe the democracy of the United States? That passage scares me ever since I started reading it several months ago about the overthrow with a dictator and voting out of existence. I'm just so grateful that we do have a constitutional republic. So, Glenn, I hope you can see that the way the word democracy is repeated so often in these passages, it is a type of brainwashing, and it has been very successfully used, because even though our children say the Pledge of Allegiance every day, which goes, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, when I've asked a couple dozen Hampton seniors and recent graduates, is the United States a democracy or republic? Without hesitation, they always answer a democracy. They have been completely indoctrinated by their textbooks. And it gets worse. Just last week, went up to my daughter's 7th grade open house, and we have a new assistant vice principal. And the person's just turned 29, very nice, has a master's degree from Duquesne University here, very well educated. But I asked them, is the United States a democracy or a republic? And they laughed and said, oh, wow, you're really putting me on the spot. And they took another second to think, and they said, well, America's a democracy, right? And I just couldn't believe it. How could an educated person like this, teaching our kids, leading our children, not know that the United States is a constitutional republic? So the bad news about that is it shows that people as old as 29 have been indoctrinated by this kind of teaching. The good news is that almost all of the parents, and I emailed 100 parents at my middle school, and only one person emailed back, and they had been educated in military schools and thought that we were a democracy. Every other parent, I must have talked to about 70, has told me that, yeah, the United States of America is a republic, like it says in the Pledge of Allegiance. And yeah, good go, Mike, keep going. And, I can't understand why the administration and the school district won't change this. The problem is that they are still, not comfortable with getting up and demanding from the administration that this policy be changed. Well, I have to say that this is too important an issue not to stand up for right now with everything that's going on in the country. We can't stand idly by and watch another group of American children graduate this fall thinking that America is a democracy. I think this has to be a litmus test. I think every child in America, when asked what type of government is the United States, they should be able to answer, America is a constitutional republic. We are not a democracy. A democracy is not a good form of government, and neither are dictatorships or communists or other systems. And they should also know that the American government is vastly superior to all others because of the individual liberties and freedom from government that our Constitution provides us.
Well, Democrats and Republicans aren't a category. The Republicans and Democrats differ. Like on the rare occasions when I vote, and they're pretty rare, sometimes I vote for Democrats, sometimes for Republicans, sometimes for somebody else. It's not a sharp split. They're two factions of the same party. We have a one-party state with two somewhat different factions with a lot of overlap. Business Party has a couple of factions. You find some differences between them. I wouldn't say there's no difference on the average. So what should you do in that case? Well, like everything, it's your own choice. Do you want to live in a democratic society, or do you want to live in the society we have, which, remember, is not a democratic society and is not intended to be? If you take a course in political theory here, I'm sure they'll teach you that the United States is not a democracy. It's what's called in the technical literature a polyarchy. That's the term invented by the leading democratic theorist, Yale professor Robert Dahl. But the idea is old. It goes way back to James Madison and the foundation of the Constitution. A polyarchy is a system in which power resides in the hands of those who Madison called the wealth of the nation, the responsible class of men, and the rest of the population is fragmented, distracted, allowed to participate. Every couple of years they're allowed to come and say, yes, thank you, why don't you continue for another 4 years? And they have a little choice among the responsible men, the wealth of the nation. That's the way the country was founded. It was founded on the principle explained by Madison in the Constitutional Convention that the primary goal of government is to protect the minority of the opulent against the majority. And then the Constitution was designed to sort of ensure that. There's been a lot of struggle about it over the years. You know, a lot of victories have been won by the public, so it's not the same as it was 2 centuries ago. But that remains. It remains the elite ideal, and it's a constant struggle. And most of the population is well aware of it. So, for example, take the November 2000 election. There was a lot of, among intellectuals, educated people, you know, university professors and people like that, there was a great deal of outrage about the stolen election, and article after article about the Supreme Court shenanigans and, you know, Florida, this and that, and so on. If you read through that literature, which was vast, you notice there was a constant refrain. Nobody could understand why the public didn't care. The public is a game among intellectuals. The public just didn't care. So, okay, the election was stolen. Who cares? It was never an issue among the public. Why wasn't it an issue? Well, you know, if you look at, this is very heavily, the attitudes in the United States are very carefully monitored. Business wants to know what people are thinking. And in fact, there is, for example, at Harvard, at the Kennedy School of Government, a project called the Vanishing Voter Project, where they study closely the attitudes of people towards the government. It turns out on the eve of the election, so like before the election, you know, before Florida and the Supreme Court, about 75% of the population didn't think there was an election going on at all, at least as far as they were concerned. Their attitude towards the thing happening was that it's some kind of a business with involving rich contributors, political leaders, and the public relations industry, which is training candidates to say meaningless words that they don't understand, that they think will maybe pick up a few more votes. Well, that's only 75% of the public. So, of course, they didn't care very much, you know, if the Supreme Court happened to hand it over to one of them rather than the other. In fact, most people voted against their own interests, and consciously, because they knew it didn't matter much. They were supposed to vote on what are called qualities, not issues. Like, do you like the guy? You know, do you want to be with him, or something like that? You want to have a drink with him in a bar, you know, something like that. That was the issue in the election. People didn't even know where the candidates stood on issues. And it's not because they're stupid. It was extremely hard to figure out where they stood on issues. And that they're trained to make it hard. And in fact, most of the issues that the public cared about weren't even allowed to come up. So the major issues, if you look at public concerns, the major issues have to do with economic affairs, international economic affairs, what's misleadingly called globalization and the trade deficit and job security and things like that. None of that stuff came up. You know, you can't bring those issues up in the elections. The free trade area of the Americas was coming up. There was going to be a summit of the Americas in a couple of months. Issues on which the public has extremely strong opinions, but none of it could be brought up in the election, and for a very simple reason. If you take a look at attitudes, there's a very sharp split between elite opinion, which is strongly in favor of all of this stuff, and the public, which is strongly opposed to them, and therefore it can't come up in the election. And it didn't. These issues are unmentioned. Virtually nobody knew that the free trade area of the Americas was coming along. So what do you do? Well, you have to decide whether you want to live in a democratic society or not. If you want to live in the kind of society that, say, Madison envisioned, okay, that's a choice. But it's certainly not necessary. Over the last couple of hundred years, there has been a very substantial extension of the right of the population, of the ability to participate and make a difference. It's not overwhelming, and there's always a struggle to beat it back, but there's no reason why that can't continue. And that's the alternative. It's not a matter
A part of that plan, of course, is to induce the gradual surrender of American sovereignty, piece by piece and step by step, to various international organizations, of which the United Nations is the outstanding but far from the only example. Here are the aims for the United States. 1, greatly expanded government spending for every conceivable means of getting rid of ever larger sums of American money as wastefully as possible. 2, higher and then much higher taxes. 3, an increasingly unbalanced budget despite the higher taxes. 4, wild inflation of our currency. 5, government controls of prices, wages, and materials, supposedly to combat inflation. 6, greatly increased socialistic controls over every operation of our economy and every activity of our daily lives. This is to be accompanied naturally and automatically by a correspondingly huge increase in the size of our bureaucracy and in both the cost and reach of our domestic government. 7, far more centralization of power in Washington and the practical elimination of our state lines. There is a many-faceted drive at work to have our state lines eventually mean no more within the nation than our county lines do now within the states. 8, the steady advance of federal aid to and control over our educational system, leading to complete federalization of our public education. 9, a constant hammering into the American consciousness of the horror of modern warfare, the beauties and the absolute necessity of peace, peace always on communist terms, of course. And 10, the consequent willingness of the American people to allow the steps of appeasement by our government which amount to a piecemeal surrender of the rest of the free world and of the United States itself. So brush the insider's dust out of your eyes, my friends, and the communist soap suds out of your brain, and ask yourselves in all honesty, what on earth is wrong with the United States simply minding its own business? Or with having its foreign policy function primarily for the safety and benefit of the American people. Which is exactly what we had done for the first 140 years of our existence as a nation, to the incredible advantage of ourselves and everybody else. Everybody, that is, except a numerically small clique of power-lusting conspirators who had somehow inflicted themselves on a gullible world. Well, we turn to a very brief summarization of what we hope the John Birch Society will help and even sometimes lead the American people to accomplish during the next 15 years. One, our first and most important specific undertaking should be to restore the complete independence of the United States. This includes our resolution to get us out of the United Nations and get the United Nations out of the United States. Two, we must once again make our money freely redeemable in gold at some realistic price. And we must take all practicable legislative steps to prevent a recurrence of the enormous thievery and other subversive crimes that have been perpetrated on the American people through a contrived inflation by every president from Franklin Roosevelt through Richard Nixon. Three, we should reduce the number of government bureaus, of government civilian employees, and the whole quantity of government by at least 50%. And we should achieve at least this much reduction in proper fashion through gradually convincing a majority of the American people of the wisdom of such a course. Four, we should withdraw all American troops from every spot on earth that is not American soil, except when and where such troops may be required as decided by Congress to protect American lives and property from criminal vandalism. Five, we should get government out of the areas and functions and activities where government does not belong. Again, all steps to this end should be taken gradually, but nevertheless just as rapidly as enough of the American people can be persuaded to support such progress. Any such achievement will require a truly massive educational force, but that's exactly what we hope to build during the next 15 years. We could go ahead for at least 100 numbered items, but the John Birch Society will undoubtedly be working on more than that many specific projects, which will be laid out in its bulletins before another 180 months will have rolled around. And all of these projects will fit into the general pattern indicated by the 5 major objectives listed above. So let's really wind up this marathon monologue with one final thought. None of us can guarantee anything about what the future will bring. Your speaker knows what a job we have before us to rid our country of the scourge of communism within the next few years, and then to go ahead on our constructive program so well that 15 years from now we shall already be entering an era of far less government, of a much sounder sense of responsibility, and, with God's help, of a better world. But I sincerely believe that it can be done, and this much I know. If every man and woman in this audience should leave here tonight feeling in his or her own mind and heart that it can and must be done, then it surely will be. And so, all of you patriots of good character, good conscience, and noble ideals, whom we can reach with the filmed version of this speech in 1,000 other audiences, it is with a great deal of confidence and energizing will to win that we invite you to join us in our epic undertaking. While to all of you great, wonderful friends in this present audience, I certainly extend my very deep thanks indeed for so much patience and attention. Thank you and good night.